Making the leap, the joy of DrupalAT. An experience share of working with DrupalAT for a simple website project. So, that's the title. Who am I? I'm Baris Tosun. I work here at Identum. Should I stand up for this or... Yeah, screw it, I'll stand up. So I work here at Identum. I've been here for nearly a year now. Before I started working here, I'd developed a Drupal 6 website and also several Drupal 7 websites. My biggest achievement in Drupal before was correctly setting up a Drupal multilingual website, which was a major pain in the ass. Anyone who's done multilingual knows that well. And yeah, so that's who I am. Just to extend on what Lucas, my boss, said earlier, we're focusing more and more on Drupal. We went to DrupalCon. That was the first sort of Drupal-oriented sort of adventure that we were on as a team. But we're trying to do more. That's why we're trying to engage more with Drupal Austria as well. And we're hoping also to eventually contribute more to either core or modules or something. Maybe do something of our own. So we get kudos for that, right? Okay, so I'm going to give a summary of the talk. What's this talk about? So choosing DrupalAT, right? So basically I developed a DrupalAT website here. The question, why DrupalAT for that particular website? I want to talk a bit about configuration management, which is a headline feature of DrupalAT and an absolutely fantastic reason to switch if you're considering it, if you haven't done so already. Some differences that I found between working in Drupal 7 and DrupalAT, and also some challenges which I face and maybe some of you will face as well. Section 1, choosing DrupalAT. So when we got back from Barcelona, we were really excited about DrupalAT, as anyone else who was there would also agree with. All of the presentations about all of the new technologies, all of the new tools, and all of the promise just got us really excited. So we really wanted to start. And then Sphinx came along. So this is our first, this is my first DrupalAT website, because my colleague Moritz jumped ahead and did a headless DrupalAT site before me. But yeah, that was also an experience. Maybe you should do a talk for that as well. So Sphinx. Basically, this was my first DrupalAT project. And yeah, it was a small and uncomplicated project. One of the reasons that we chose it was because it was small and uncomplicated. We wanted to use DrupalAT, but we just couldn't risk picking a bigger client or a bigger project to devote that time to. There was also the advantage that there was a fairly long time to completion. So we weren't under any immediate pressure. It wasn't like a 3 or 4 week project which we had to get done. And there was also, we just had to start somewhere, right? You have to jump at some point. So before I started we made the decision to start on this project in DrupalAT. But before I started, I had some questions about the whole experience. So one of the things that I was really excited about in Barcelona was Twig. All of the promises of it should be easier to read, easier to write, just easier and better to work with. But what was it actually like to use? Having experience of working with the previous templating system, what was it actually like to use something which I'd never used before, which is supposedly better? Updates the processes. So, given that we've been working on Drupal 7 for a while, given that it's a new system, what would we need to change about the way that we work? If anything at all. I mean, how similar would it be? Also, would there be any negative impacts to making the jump to DrupalAT? You know, so we expect it's new, it's shiny, it's better. So, you know, but yeah, so we expect that everything's going to just work, right? But you know, would there be any unforeseen, you know, negative consequences or side effects? By the way, if I'm speaking too fast, just say so, and I'll drink more beer. Okay, so where are we? And how ready is DrupalAT to use? You know, we were using it for a simple project, but could we use it for something more substantial? So I also had some expectations going in. So start off, yeah. So I expected that it would be challenging. I mean, there was a lot to learn, and a lot that I didn't even know that I would have to learn. I just expected that there would be lots of obstacles that I would have to overcome. I expected it to be time-consuming, so I was very grateful that we had this gap of time before completing, and the project manager's smiling away at me. Yeah. Okay. So so time-consuming. I expected it would be time-consuming. I expected at least that I wouldn't be able to do things as quickly as I would with something more familiar. So yeah, missing contrib module. So you know, it's a new system. I don't know how many of you in anticipation were reading up on Drupal.org about your contrib modules that you use for your projects, but I was there making a list of all of our default modules and paying attention to all of their DrupalAT notices, promised to release on day one when DrupalAT is released and all of that, and yeah, right, no way. There was none of the, well, a few of those promises were kept, and a lot of them were not, so, you know, we had to deal with that, or that was an expectation of mine at least. And yeah, I did expect that it would be better. I was hopeful. I'm just a hopeful kind of person, so you know, I went in thinking, yeah, it's going to be better, right? Thing is that I was looking forward to with DrupalAT using Twig because, well, you know, I think it's obvious. It speaks for itself. If anyone's watched any presentations about Twig in DrupalAT, you can't deny that it's going to make your front end development a lot easier, and I'm definitely invested in my front end development. So so okay. Well, yeah, I was looking forward to the updated and improved interface. So, like many of you, I'd installed DrupalAT and I'd had a look at the administration theme, and it was just that alone was enough to make me just want to switch, right? And I was just looking forward to digging deeper into DrupalAT. Okay. Section 2, configuration management. Okay, so let me ask you actually at this point, how many of you have developed DrupalAT websites? Okay, so how many of you are interested in developing DrupalAT websites? Quite a lot of you. Okay. This is the reason that you should do it immediately. This is the reason, like the number one reason to make the switch. This is the number one reason why you should drop any contribution to Drupal 7, sorry, any maintainers, and start focusing your attention on Drupal 8, right? So, what's the problem with Drupal 7? So, once you've pushed a site live, and a client turns around and says, okay, right, I want to change the way that this works. I want to add something or remove something, right? So what you do is you synchronize your local development environment with the database that you get from live. Then you work your magic. Where are we? Good. Okay, right, it's working. So once you've finished all of the changes, you then push to a test environment, and you synchronize your database across. And then what you can't do is you can't do this step. You can't simply push from your test environment once everything's approved and fine. You can't simply push it to live, because the way that Drupal 7 stores your configuration is in the database. And so to push your changes live, you need to overwrite the database that's live. It's the Drupal 7 problem, right? And this is how we're told that modern development workflows should work, right? So this is how it should all work. So client asks for change. You download and synchronize your database with your local development environment. You make your changes and you push your configuration, the new and improved version, to a test environment. And again, you synchronize your database across. I forgot that arrow on the previous one, so that's why it's not there. And once your client says, right, I'm happy with that, you then push live, right? So that's how it should work. There should be no clash. There should be a separation between what's going on in your files and your configuration and what's going on in your database. And that is basically what DrupalAT. Well, they've got it 99% right. Okay, there are limits as to how far you can go. I'll go into that a bit later on maybe. So, so how do you do that with DrupalAT? Okay, so I'm sure. Okay, let's jump to the next slide. So once you've finished your DrupalAT installation, as well as your database information, which gets written into your settings.php file, you get this line, this config directory sync line, right? So by default, it's this huge hash which is randomly generated at the time of install, and what this does is it points to your configuration directory. So that's where any changes, any configuration you make to your site gets stored. And in theory, you can take this. Well, this in the previous slide where we talked about sort of jumping from, pushing your configuration from here to here. Then the idea is that whether you copy and whether you use FTP or Git, you get this directory identical to the directory that's on here. Yeah, so you synchronize the files. And so what I do, because I personally find it a lot easier, is I give it a manageable name, and I put it also into site's default. Because if anyone uses the default gitignore file, we use Git, or we're trying to use Git more here. But by default, the Drupal gitignore file will ignore anything that's in your files directory. And so I put it into site's default config, where it shows up as a change when you're managing your repo with Git. And what you do then in your command line, if you're using that, if you're not using Drush, use it. Just if that's something that you find challenging. I mean, I did when I first started working here. I knew it was going to save me a lot of time, but I was still reluctant to use it. But I'm really, really glad I made the switch. So anyway, so back on topic. Drush config export. What that does is it will populate this folder with all of your config files, like so. So then it will automatically generate the config folder, and it will automatically copy these 170 odd files of your default DrupalAT installation. That's basically your config. That's what you can synchronize, and if you make any changes, well, you'll see soon enough, right? At that point, I'd like to stop because it's demo time. Right, so right. So, as well as being my first DrupalAT project, this is also my first presentation, and also my first experience with screen recording. So, this took a long time to prepare. Anyone who's ever done this kind of thing before will just attest to that. It's, you get halfway through and you're like, okay, and now I need this file. Damn, I forgot it. And then you start again, and then, a lot of sort of repetition. Anyway, so.
It's not live?
No. Oh, hell no. What do you think I am? Naive? I think that's one of the first things I heard someone say about presentations was if you're doing any demonstrations, don't do it live. You just can't concentrate and talk and yeah, it's impossible. Anyway, so let's see how this goes. So what we've got here, let me just describe what's going on. So 2 tabs, left-hand tab, I'll let you know when we make the switch because it's quite bright. But I've got a local environment working and I've got a testing environment working. And this is the wrong, there we go. So here we go. Right, so we've got 2 environments, and on the left-hand side you have the configuration drop down. A lot of people don't know that they're drop downs. Just click on the buttons and it just saves you time. And then the configuration management in the back end is in this location called configuration synchronization, which is under the development menu, which is under the configuration menu, right? And so we continue. Right now we have 3 tabs: the synchronize tab, the import tab, and the export tab. You can see that there are no configuration changes to import, which is good. It means that the site's stable and there's nothing been changed since the last time you checked. And if you click across to import or export, they both give you the same sub options. You have the option to import or export a full archive or a single item. The full archive is a tarball of all of those files I showed you in the config directory, and the single item is just one YAML file, and it gives you an input box so you can type the configuration manually or copy and paste. Okay. So right now there are no changes, but we want to demonstrate, so we need to make some changes. So let's go into content types, and the default basic page is not good enough. I need an extra field because body and picture just don't cut it. Let's add an email field to basic page because that's very relevant. You need an email field with your basic page. If you don't have one, you're doing it wrong. Just at this point, what do I do? Okay, so yeah, at this point, so this is, I'm leaving all of this blank, but this all counts as part of the configuration as well. I'm just going ahead with the default options. Now you can see that there's this new field, and if you also look at this screen here, you'll see that you've got all of the changes, all of the configuration changes associated with adding a field. It shows you that two existing files have changed, and two existing files have changed, and two new files have been generated. Right? This bit's confusing here because why would I want to import these changes? Right? I'll explain that in just a moment. So anyway, these are the changes that we've made by adding a field to basic page. And I didn't click view differences because I'll do that later. Now what we do is we actually do all of the command line magic. So we check the git status. There's absolutely, it's a clean it's a clean branch. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. So just rewind it a step. Right, so drush config export. Right, this is what we do to export all of the changes that are made in our database into YAML files, which get stored into the config folder. And before you go ahead and create the files, it gives you a list of the changes, and they're identical to the changes which you see in the back end. And here you go, we just created them. Then we need to add those changes to our repository. And we need to then commit those changes, and then we need to push those changes. I really appreciate git commit messages. It's one of those things when you first start using Git that you just think, oh, do I really have to? But later on, when you're trying to switch between, basically that's your undo button. Keep that in mind. Anyway, so now we are going to because we've done our export, we see that the config directory has been updated with the new information, the new configuration that we've created, which means that there are no changes between the database that the site's running on and the files that are stored locally. So now we switch over to the testing site, and just to prove that it is in an identical, basically just to prove that that I haven't done this sort of sneakily. I'm just going to open up the configuration settings to show that there are no changes, and also I think I did that before. But yeah, basically, I think I might have skipped something there, but anyway. So git fetch. This is our synchronization of the files. We just merged our local tree with the repository, and those changes now show up. So what we want to do is we want to update the live site with the new config, and I'm going to fast forward here because our dev server is slow. I promised I'd bitch about that at this stage. Hint, hint. Yeah, so I think I went too fast there, but it's okay. All right, so you get your little, while it's working, it gives you a little progress bar, but at the end of it, you get this screen, successfully imported, no changes, and if you go into your basic page content type, you'll see the new field has been added. Right, am I still going not too fast? Because I feel like I'm speeding up.
Okay.
Right. At this point, I said I would explain what that import all button thing was all about. This is something you should be careful about when you're starting out with DrupalAT and Contig Management. Basically, that import all button says push me. It says when you're on that screen and you see these changes, you you're just trained as a web user to push the button, right? The thing is, I'll show you what happens when you push that button using this demonstration. So we have the basic page content type, which has the 3 fields, and the configuration, as far as the database and the files are concerned, they're identical. But I want to delete this image, right? Pause. I want to delete one of the fields, right? Before I do that, it gives me just a heads up. A configuration update is about to happen, and this is what's going to be removed. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. Push the button. Now it's gone, right? So what happens now? If we go into our configuration synchronization page, we'll see all of these changes. This is the point you have to remember when you're new to this, at least, is that what this page shows you is the difference. All right, so your config folder, which you created at the start, that's your master configuration. So whatever's stored in there is what this page will compare against. So that means that if you make any changes, that means that as far as the active, this is what the active, the folder is the master. It is the active configuration, and what's staged is what you've just created. Right. So import. So that's what the difference is between. Hang on, my computer went off now. Pause. Yeah. So what happens if you push import all? Let's actually go ahead and push import all. Nope, not yet. Reluctant to push import all. So then a bit of. Right, so now there are no configuration changes to be made. And what we do, hang on, I want to continue. We go back to our content type, our basic page, and we see that the changes I made have been reversed. What it's done is it's reset the database information to the configuration that was in the folder. In this example, I deleted a field, and reversing the change means adding the field back. But if you've just been working for an hour, adding a new content type, adding a view to go with the display of that content, adding a menu item. You've just created this really nice structure for your website. You go to that page and you push import all without thinking, because you're a web user and you're programmed to push buttons. You remove all of that information because it's not stored in your config file, right? Let that be a warning to you, because I've done that. And I'm sure that anyone who's worked on, well, I'm not sure actually. Maybe
I guess on the development server there's no point in time recovery for it afterwards.
That's yeah. So remember, don't push the button, and if you're in doubt, push the view differences button if you're not sure what the import all is going to do. Right, so that was my demonstration. And let's go back to our, let's go back here. And there we go.
I have a question.
You have a question?
So you changed your config files path to sites default config, right?
Yes.
So the problem with that is that if you don't have a web server rule which forbids to download YAML files,
Yes.
any user can download your YAML files. So that's why Drupal core uses per default this long hash
Yes.
to obscure the fact where the configuration directory
Yes.
is, so that people cannot download it.
Yes.
So as a professional, as we all are, what we should do is put it outside of the document. So for
Absolutely.
example, you should use /config, then it will be just
Out.
one level outside
Absolutely.
of the web group.
Absolutely. So, just a very good point there. If you, for the demonstration purposes, I've just gone and created a simple folder there. If you read through the settings.php comments, you'll be told, that there's some information, further information about that fact. Yeah, so that you keep that in mind. You should ideally be doing it outside of a folder that can be viewed by anybody, right? Check your file permissions and your ownerships. Thank you.
I've got a question. Are you able to export some other configuration like display switch?
The answer to that is yes and no. I think things like
or whole views or
yeah.
parts
So
of views?
as far as core is concerned, from what I understand, I mean most things in core. I'm going to go on to a little bit about that. But in terms of Contig modules, as far as I understand, it has to be built into the module. But also DrupalAT want you to use configuration management, and so as far as I understand, any Contig maintainers can verify this. But as far as I understand, the tools are there to introduce this process into your modules. So if Display Suite wants to have this process, then Display Suite integrates it into their.
So I would say like every module that follows best practices in DrupalAT has integration with that, and also Display Suite and all the modules have it. So it's like very broad support. Everything like has a very strong separation between content and configuration in DrupalAT, and everything that's configuration is covered by the configuration management and synchronization. That's really good.
Yeah, I was using a Contig module called Paragraphs. So maybe some of you have heard of it. Yeah, they've got a working Drupal 8 version, and they also included this. So I was using it with Contig, but I think it's yeah.
It looks better than the features module.
Oh well, 100%.
It was very confusing.
Yeah, and that's no detriment to the features developers. It's because features was never intended to fulfill this purpose. It just had to. Right, that's enough of MC Hammer. So basically, it works with almost everything. This is basically the point. It works with views. It works with menus. It works with with block positioning, right? But not block content. And basically, that's blocks are a special case because they tread this fine line between what's configuration and what's content, right? Because a client comes along and puts stuff into a block. I think I heard someone in a talk somewhere say that that's basically where you draw the line is when someone comes in and puts information, when the client comes in and puts information in. But yeah, so time for another demo to highlight this fact about blocks. Yeah, screw it, I'll just go ahead with it. Right, so I'm going to do this one entirely on slight fast forward actually. So blocks layout, this has been updated as well in DrupalAT. As well as your normal, block layout view here. You've also got this custom block library tab, which I don't go into in this demo as far as I'm aware. But, oh no, I do actually, because I need to create a new block. Right, so I'm going to create a new block and I'm going to position it. Let's add a block, let's give it a title, faster, faster, faster. And then let's position it. Well, actually, it doesn't tell me that there are any. It doesn't tell me that there are any configuration changes at this point, because all I've done is I've added a block. I've added content, basically, right? So as far as the configuration management interface is concerned, I haven't changed anything. Well, okay, I didn't need to do this bit because it basically tells me there are no. It just verifies what. Let's go back. But now I'm going to place a block. I'm going to put it into the content container, the region of the theme. And I'm going to reorder it because I want it to be at the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now when it's there now, I can see it. And Contig Management now tells me that there are changes to the site. Right, so here we go. I'm going to add it, I'm going to commit it, I'm going to push it, and I'm going to fast forward it. This is boring. Let's go over to the other side. Let's fetch it, let's merge it. I'm just fast forwarding just to highlight the point, because what I really want to get to is the final slide, which says that we've just imported those changes. Oh no, we're about to import those changes. And so far it looks like everything's working. Whereas in actuality...
The best feature of the new update.
Totally. Bitch. And there we go. So there we go. Right. The new block which I added on my local development version is there. But if I go to the site, what do I see? That this block is broken or missing. I get a default error message. That's strange. Everything looked like it was working fine, but it didn't. What if I click on the configuration of the block? Well, the title and the location is all fine. But if I go to the custom block library, it doesn't show up because it's content. So obviously, I save yourself some time. Don't try to do it this way. There is, if you want to add blocks, as far as I understand, and maybe someone could tell me a better way, but you can create a module using something like Drupal console. But basically, you would create a module which defines a block for you to use. If you're developing a theme for a client, if you're developing a theme for your client, give them also. If you need blocks, develop a module for your client as well, which should define all of the blocks. There you'll get files which you can edit and manipulate, as far as I understand. And as soon as you enable that module, they will show up in your block layout. You will be able to place them where you like, and they will be accounted for in the configuration management interface. Right. Let's go back. So blocks are a special case. That's basically a short way of saying that. So let's move on quickly because I think I'm dragging on a bit here. Some other differences that I noticed between Drupal 7 and DrupalAT: folder structure. You now have, in the root directory, you have a core folder where everything is stored. All of your core files are stored, rather. Don't touch that. Don't mess with it. Don't change it. Just, kind of all of the same rules apply. It's just your folder structure looks nicer now. All of your personal modules, or the modules that you use on your site, will go in there. Again, in the root directory, which is nice and simple. And so do all of your themes. So if you're developing a theme for your client, slap it in there. Okay, so it seems silly to bring this up, but actually there's no documentation. Well, it's hard to find the documentation right now to sort of tell you all of this stuff. But yeah, sites all, as far as I'm aware, is still supported. So, you know, you're all going to go in and make your new DrupalAT sites, and you're all going to go with the old folder structure that you're used to. It still works. Something else which they introduced. Well, I think they introduced it in DrupalAT. I don't know which version they introduced it in, but the idea of a settings.local.php. So if you're doing things the way that I just demonstrated with a Git-based deployment, then this will come in handy. What you have is, previously you would have one settings.php file which you stored all of your database information, all of your configuration sort of settings, and that file was created uniquely on each installation. You'd either copy and paste, or obviously you would update your database information among other things. But there's a lot of redundancy. There's a lot of things which are identical across the sites. So there's documentation for this in settings.php as well. In fact, this is from settings.php. If you uncomment these 3 lines, then settings.php looks for a settings.local.php. That's where you put your database information. That's where you put your environment-specific information. That way, you can commit your settings.php to your repository and share that between each environment of your site. And that means that you can enable things like caching on your testing server or your live server. You can enable things like debugging information on your local development version, and you don't need to worry about those changes as far as your version controlling is concerned. Yeah, so just uncomment, right? And also, yes, DrupalAT comes with an example.settings.local.php, so you don't even need to. You've got all of your, the common settings are already there. You just need to go and uncomment, as you might expect. Okay, Twig, another difference, right? So start learning it as soon as possible. If you're planning on using DrupalAT, your mileage may vary. Some people are going to be, maybe some of you have worked with Twig before. Some of you maybe haven't. I found these resources to be really useful. The Sensio Labs website. It's got tons of examples of how to use it. Everyone points you to that particular site. It is good. Sometimes it can be a bit thick, it can be a bit dense. There's a lot of information there, but it is a useful resource. I rewatched this presentation at DrupalCon in Barcelona like 3 or 4 times now. It's really good. Every time I watch through it, there's more information. That was fun. Okay, yeah. So every time I've watched through it, I've found something else new that's relevant. And believe me, there's lots of information there that you will find relevant. So make sure you sort of get that. I've got some references at the end, and I'll make this presentation available. But yeah, there are also tons of comments in the Drupal template, so that's also something to keep in mind. Turn on Twig debugging, right? So, this is going to make theming easier for you. What Twig debugging does is it gives you these theme suggestions, or the template suggestions. So when you do your inspect element in your browser for any particular element, it will tell you which template files you need to edit. I mean, this is probably, I don't know if any of you have heard of this, but if you haven't, this is definitely useful. How do you do it? So yeah, you've got a default services YAML file, which you copy into a services YAML file, and then what you do is the default is false, and you change your debug to true. Then that enables that wonderful output there. I grabbed this list of Twig filters from that talk that I mentioned earlier. I've wasted a lot of time during my development process looking at how to do this, and yeah, it's one of those things that there are filters or There are some guides out there on which filters you should use where, but yeah, this information was not there, and this would have made things a lot easier. So normally things get stored in the database. Like if you add content into a body field, things like paragraph tags, all of your HTML tags get stored in the database as well. In DrupalAT, everything is automatically escaped, which means if you're trying to create a field which represents, I don't know, a URL, then you get all of this. If there are any spaces or any hyphens, that all gets. I mean, spaces will also be output, and it doesn't work well for your links, for your front end links. And well, basically using these filters will put it into the right format. So it'll add things like, turn things into ASCII codes where necessary. Just use them. I didn't have time to actually give some demonstrations, but if you look at that presentation I showed you, yeah, there are tons of examples in there. Blocks are much better in DrupalAT. You have fieldable blocks, so you can create. It's basically like it's an individual content type. So you can add an image to a block so that a client can then update a block with his own image rather than fiddling around with CK editor. That in itself is amazing, right? That opens up a lot of possibilities. It works more like how you expect, visually how you expect blocks to work. When you look at a web page, you normally have like a content sort of a region and a sidebar region, and the client will often say, I want to put something here, but I also want that little thing also to be on that page, but on another side. And you now have block instances, so you can create a block once, but position it in multiple regions on different pages. It's a bit more flexible. And entity references. I said that blocks or custom blocks are fieldable, which means that you can create a block which references a content that you've already created on your website, which means that you can place that content anywhere that you want. You don't need views, if you want 2 or 3 examples of, if you want to place 2 or 3 of one content on a particular page, you don't need to create a view for it necessarily. You can create a custom block that has an entity reference to that content and create several of them. Okay, some challenges. God, I thought this would be a lot. Thought this would be over by now. Okay, so I wasn't prepared for object-oriented programming. I wasn't. I'm one of those people that have sort of learned enough PHP to get the job done, and so I wasn't really following PHP on an API level, and so I came across a lot of challenges when I was reading this syntax, which I just didn't understand. So if you're not familiar, it's time to start reading up on it, basically, unfortunately. Code examples are seriously lacking, so Google won't necessarily be your friend. Most of the examples that you find are Drupal 7 examples. If you're lucky, those examples will be the same in Drupal 8. If you're unlucky, you need to do a bit more digging. I found these resources very useful. Almost daily I idle on the Drupal channel on Freenode. If you don't use IRC, it's Facebook before Facebook was Facebook, right? It's groups and instant messaging and but if you don't, honestly, just start using IRC and start idling there when you're at work, when you're working on this stuff. And Drupal Stack Exchange, you'll find that when you're working on a problem, you may just want to create an issue on Drupal Stack Exchange. By the time, even if you're going to look for an answer yourself anyway, just create the task there anyway. Because if you find the answer, you can put the solution there, and later on it's searchable, right? Even if you're the one that finds the answer, it's useful for someone else who has the same issue. Somebody told me that forums on Drupal.org are also useful. I didn't use them at all, but I only found out about it after the project, and so.
No, they aren't useful anymore.
Okay.
I'm going to take my right now.
Okay, maybe I should remove that if I do a V2 of this. Okay, so buggy modules. Yeah, we came across this module in. I told you about paragraphs module. I came across a very obscure bug which actually affected us once we were already live, and we had to do well. In the end we found a workaround, but the point is that I don't know. I guess I was lucky that we only had one. It could have been more.
Maybe you don't know.
Yeah, possible. Maybe we'll do a round 2 in a few months. But yeah, if you do find any bugs, be sure to report them on Drupal.org on the project page. That's what we did with paragraphs. There's a conversation going on about it. If you've got a bit more time, take some screenshots. Fill in a proper bug report. Incomplete alpha beta status module. So one of the reasons we don't switch is because our favorite module or our most useful module isn't ready yet. In this particular case, there weren't that many examples because we chose a project which didn't require so many, non-standard modules, and so it wasn't a big issue for us. But it is something to consider. And if you do have time, contribute to core, or contrib. Actually, a lot of people don't know how to do that. So that maybe that's a subject for a talk. Yeah. So at the start, I had some questions about DrupalAT. What's people like to use? Great. Once you get used to it, it really was fun to use, and it makes the front end side of it just much more enjoyable. Updates to processes, yes. Like if you're going to use configuration management, definitely consider using your Git-based deployment. If you haven't set it up already, it's maybe a good time to get that started. It has other benefits as well, backing up all of your site, backing up your site basically, and making sure that you can track back changes and any negative differences. Well, yeah, I mean, I can't change the fact that the code examples aren't so extensive yet, and it is just going to take longer to develop DrupalAT sites for us, and there are certain sites which we couldn't attempt at all until the modules are ready. So, how ready is DrupalAT for use? Throwaway answer. It depends. It really depends on the site. It's always the same. It's always the same answer for that question. So I can't really. Yeah, that's basically it. So, in conclusion, configuration management is awesome. That alone is worth sort of jumping and committing to DrupalAT. You have to consider your modules, but even more now than you do with Drupal 7. Be prepared for the new goodies of PHP, because it's part and parcel of Drupal 8. Make sure you add extra time to your time plan, because it is, unless you're a lot quicker than I am, and that's actually not that hard, to be fair. It is going to take you longer, and wherever possible, contribute to Drupal.org, because that's how these problems are gonna be erased in the future. The other part of the conclusion is that Drupal 7 isn't going anywhere anytime soon, so you do have time. There's no real urgency. But my experience was basically after using Drupal 8, I don't really want to use Drupal 7, because I do think that overall it's a better change, right? Thank you very much. That's the conclusion. Now I can start drinking. So I'm going to make this PowerPoint available, or don't know, maybe it's a PDF or something. But I put some of the useful resources on the final page for reference, and that's the questions. That's it, basically. Does anybody have any questions?
What's the prediction on when the most important modules will be production ready?
You're asking me. Okay. I really can't say. I mean, it depends. I mean, I saw a presentation a long time ago about the adoption rate from Drupal 6 to Drupal 7, and what tends to happen is that when the new version is promised, then the old version adoption, or the interest in the old version begins to slow down, and the new version begins to sort of begin slowly to build up followers and developers and whatnot. And what tends to happen is that once it's launched, there's a bit of time once it's launched where people are gradually, like me, making the switch. But what happens is that a lot of people make the switch in the months after a new version is released. And what you'll probably find is that in the next sort of 3 months, summer's also a busy time, a time where lots of people concentrate on these things. What you find is that you get a massive influx of people developing, and it's happening now. If you pay attention to the module project pages and the statuses, you'll find that there's a lot of activity on the module. So I can't really give you a time, but I can say that right now there's a lot of activity on DrupalAT versions of modules, and so as soon as they can get it done, really, and yeah.
If we compare the history to Drupal 6, it was half a year after Drupal 7 was released, and really the adoption really started to go off crazy. So Drupal 7 was released, and then basically nothing happened. It was just adding a couple of users, and then after half a year it really took off. So that half a year after the DrupalAT release would be now in April. So you basically just have to take a look at the usage statistics of DrupalAT, and if you see this uptick, then now there is a certain point of productivity reached where a lot of people are adopting. Yeah.
Is the active from, I don't know, custom fav icon for the users like nobody cares about?
No, it's really the usage of Drupal core, right? Because Drupal core phones home and tells Drupal.org this server is using the DrupalAT version. And if lots of sites are doing that, then a lot of people are using DrupalAT now.
Yeah.
What also might be interesting to mention is like that there's like the what's it called, the module upgrade program. What's the name? Like Acquia has like a program where they like invest a lot of money like in getting module upgrades done faster. It's like going like during the last months, like and basically since the launch of DrupalAT, it's like there's a lot of efforts put into like getting all the major content modules ready, and all the development work shifted like from getting core ready to like getting the concepts ready, and that's like going on like during the last months, and like by now like most major modules have at least beta versions, and it's like going to stabilize during the next couple of months. So it's like a lot of efforts around content modules seen right now, and I would expect that way that like most critical modules are available during the upcoming couple of months, but it of course always depends a little bit on the module, because some modules are part of the program, others aren't, and it always depends, but I would say like the most important ones are ready or should be ready in a couple of months.
And it's also important to say that DrupalAT is much more feature complete than Drupal 7, so there's views included and much more modules that doesn't have to be ported because it's the core.
That's a very relevant point. I actually took that slide out, but in our default Drupal 7 installation, we have over 20 modules as part of a standard installation before we've added any specifics. But in DrupalAT, it was something like 6, because core has absorbed a lot of the best, most popular, most commonly used modules. So yeah.
Did you consider to upgrade the Drupal 7 website to 8? This one is probably more academic because the modules are not written.
That's an interesting question. For us personally, we have clients who we have contracts for updates. So we maintain them. We make sure that any security patches are immediately updated. And of course, most of our clients are on Drupal 7. Most of those clients are. And so for us, until now we haven't, but for those clients, I think it's something that we would look at because of the configuration management side. Being able to handle it all using just the command line obviously saves a lot more time, and so for certain sites we'd consider it, but one step at a time. One step at a time. I haven't tried it yet myself. No.
It was really hard. We did some migration, which was hard stuff to do. So
Kind of horrible.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyone who's
So in general, it's like not just an update, but the process of how it turns out to work is that you actually build a new site in DrupalAT and you migrate the data into. And there's also like a migration process which gets you started with that, but it won't ever cover all the content modules and everything because that just changes.
Yeah.
For now, the need is not that big because there's still updates available. So
Yeah, that's exactly it. We don't have a big need for it right now. The sites work, they function. There are patches being released, but that doesn't mean to say that other people shouldn't look into it or consider it. Any other questions?
Do you handle end of life in your maintenance contracts as well?
Not at this time, as far as I'm aware. Do we handle end of life? No.
So you will be forced in 4 or 5 years to actually upgrade.
Yeah, but by that time.
Major releases like a new Drupal version. That's
Yeah, I also imagine that, especially considering some of these sites are quite old already, I would expect that by that time we would either develop a new site or migrate it across.
To be honest, I can't think of an example where end of life was an issue, just because looking in the past, like if you consider that Drupal 7 was the real Drupal version for 6 years, and you consider the life cycle of a website, there's really no end of life issue. 6 years is basically not by the development or the rapid process that the web in itself develops right now. And you never can tell anyone what's going to happen in 6 years. Not.
I mean, so maybe, if you want to talk about contract specifics, I guess Uli's a really good person to discuss, to converse with about that.
So just in case, if you're still running on a Drupal 6 site, so end of life has reached them, you really should upgrade to DrupalAT then.
Yeah.
We don't have Drupal 6.
not anymore.
Right.
It's still working, just for people it will not break.
Just don't try to hack it. So any more questions? Last call. There's one person at the back.
You said be sure to plan in extra time. Do you have any sort of estimate as to how much extra time that was?
Good question. Actually, we're going to have a meeting tomorrow.
I'll come back tomorrow.
Well, we're having a meeting, an internal meeting about this particular project, about the time that it took, and we usually have a post-mortem at the end of the project, so where we discuss the specifics. And so I guess if you ask me that question tomorrow, I'd probably have a better answer. However, I would say definitely for the first couple of projects, I'd factor in like an extra 50% at least.
Okay. Okay,
So
no, wait.
Yeah.
I'd say it really depends on the let's say it really depends on the scope of the project. If you have a small project, you could easily consider 300%. Easily. That's no joke, and it's really a huge deal. But I would tell 3 times the time that you need. If you take a really large project, maybe just 50%.
I was asking about this project in specific, so a small
I'd
project.
say 300.
And to be fair, he was actually monitoring my time, so.
We can discuss this tomorrow anyway, so.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's okay.
It's
You
not
need
good.
that learning.
I mean, yeah, if I was a freelancer, I'd probably not go below not go below 50% more anyway. But yeah, normally when you're a freelancer though, you double the time at least, don't you?
So maybe it's just.
So sure. Any other questions? Thank you very much then.